right, thank you, gentlemen, for coming up here, and also for being part of one of the last sessions of the day. The first thing we'll do, the normal question, is to tell us each. I mean, you each work for very different organizations with different focuses. And so, first is to introduce your organization and tell us a little bit about how you're supporting DPIs. And because you're closest, Robert, I'm going to start with you. Tell us about co-develop and tell us how you support DPIs.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Steve. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Robert Karanja, and I think I'm in a unique position, seated up here because I'm kind of seated in the middle of three of my grantees. I guess I would describe co-develop as a global nonprofit that was established just over 2 years ago to fund or fast track the adoption of digital public infrastructure in various countries around the world. And we do this by funding 4 types of projects, or funding 4 different buckets. First, we invest or make investments in digital public goods, such as Mojaloop, to fast track the adoption of digital public infrastructure. We also make investments in technical assistance, so technical assistance firms that can support countries as they adopt digital public infrastructure. The third bucket that we fund is around research in digital public infrastructure. It could be universities, consulting companies that are doing undertaking research around DPI. And the fourth bucket is we also fund a bucket of work that we call the ecosystem enablement, which is essentially making investments in civil society organizations in various countries, such that as we're also funding tech adoption, we're also funding the other leg, which is civil society, to be able to speak and engage with the government as digital public infrastructure is being implemented in their countries. And in summary, that's what we do at co-develop. Thank you.
Thanks, Robert. And I do want to, and thank you again for being for us being a grantee of co-develop. I want to highlight one thing was that the last conversation we had about the study that we're doing with Oxford. The reason for that study came from you guys. You in particular believed in this idea of how we were going to change our go-to-market strategy about 1.5 years ago, and invested in us to do that. And it wasn't until we were doing our annual study to you, and I was preparing the report, and I said, wow, we actually had a lot of good this year. And that turned into this paper. So the paper we're publishing with Oxford is very much an output of what co-develop has invested in us. So thank you for that. Jean Bosco, same question of how does AFR, what is AFR? What are your objectives? How do you invest in these types of infrastructure programs? Because I know you are sorting very much R&DPS in a variety of ways.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you for having me this afternoon. Great conversations here. It's my first time at this convening, and I've been enjoying it since yesterday. So we are, I'm coming from Access to Finance Rwanda. We are a not-for-profit special purpose vehicle that was established back in 2010 to promote inclusive finance and financial sector development. Back then, we had a problem in Rwanda where 52% of the adult population was excluded from the financial ecosystem, be it formal and informal. So we are part of a bigger network called FSD network, for those that are familiar with that network across Sub-Saharan Africa, present in 10 countries. I think the latest ones are FSD Ethiopia and FSD Somalia. I'm sure some people are here. Why do we engage in DPI? I'll first start that with the fact that, we've been talking about eCash and Rwanda Switch. In fact, we've been with them in this journey since 2014. That's quite long. So interoperability is not just an easy game. You take time to understand exactly what you want to achieve, but also you align interests and incentives and ensure that you draw a vision, a shared vision, align all the stakeholders around you, then look for funding for that particular vision. And that's what we have done. Why? As an SPV or a basket fund funded by different development partners, including co-develop, we said, well, we believe in instant payment, digital instant payment. And I remember that at the time, in fact, the central bank had issued an interoperability policy or guidance, 2014, done by David Porteous. And the private sector wasn't moving until 2018. And that's when actually, as a market, we sat together to do the RNDPS blueprint that is guiding what we are having now. So why did we come as DPs? It's because, I mean, I think you highlighted it, Steve, very eloquently. You know, this is a venture where private capital will not move. It's a venture even where public sector money with squeezed budget, it will be hard actually to venture into that. And you find that a blending of both public sector money and philanthropic funding actually can bring this to fruition. And that's what I have seen in Rwanda, where government is putting in money, but development partners also putting in money because you run a switch as a cost recovery, on a cost recovery model. And that really requires that you are patient. You need patient capital for you to see the impact in the long run. So that's how we are in this space. And we believe we are progressing very well. When I look at the numbers, in fact, the DPI use cases that we have supported, all of them, I would take two actually, eCash and another platform on informal sector pension scheme. Both are serving 50% of the adult population of Rwanda, which is great. And now you can see the numbers are coming and revenues are coming. So thank you.
Thank you. And I'm not just up until now with eCash, but I just want to highlight that, as we've talked about, we're eager to partner with you on the newly approved fintech strategy and how that ties into RDPS. And I think you guys are going to be the key leader in making sure that the right type of capital is injected into the market. So just want to highlight, very excited to work with you on the new fintech strategy. Wale, our core partner. Africa needs no introduction to most of the people in this room, I think, but I'd like you to go ahead and do it anyway, and then talk about not just the support you provide in terms of your in-kind and your team, but also what kinds of potential financial support you could provide.
All right. Thank you very much, Steve, and a pleasure to be here again. Africa Nenda is an independent Africa-led foundation. It is 100%, it's 100% sponsored by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, but it remains independent. It's technology agnostic. We breathe financial inclusion, and we are very committed to the deployment and implementation of payment systems that support the bottom of the pyramid. Africa Nenda believes that instant and inclusive payment systems will play a pivotal role in helping to reduce exclusion, but perhaps more importantly, encourage economic and social inclusion. At Africa Nenda, we work with a lot of partners, primarily central banks, national switches, hub operators. We provide a wide range of services ranging from technical services, program implementation, helping payment system promoters to scale and also working towards operator sustainability. We see a future where there is a lot of funding available today, and I'll be talking a bit more about that. But we also see a future where there may not be so much funding. So there's a big effort in terms of ensuring that payment systems that are being implemented are sustainable and will be able to survive without subsidies. I think that it would be moot if we build 54 payment systems across Africa, and then in 10 years' time, half of them are not sustainable and are no longer able to deliver on our financial inclusion objectives. Aside from the services I've just mentioned, we also work with a lot of other ecosystem partners. So we work with the Mojaloop Foundation, we work with Access to Finance Rwanda, we work with so many other stakeholders in the room. We also have a flagship publication called the State of Instant and Inclusive Payment Report. I'm happy to say that we will be launching the 3rd edition in Accra next week, and everybody's invited. This is a report that captures where we are at in terms of instant and inclusive payment systems. It captures the growth trajectory from instant payment systems as they move across the inclusivity spectrum to become more and more inclusive payment systems. Another key function that we do is to help crowdsource funding for the deployment and implementation of projects. And I'll be talking in greater detail how we do that and how promoters such as yourselves in this room can access that kind of funding. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you all. And for anyone who's never read the SIPS report, if there's one thing that you read of all of the development organization reports every year, please read the SIPS report. It is by far the best report of the year for me in terms of where we stand and what we're working on. And so yeah, anyone who can get to Ghana next week, please go there for the launch. And yeah, I do want to also highlight, in case it wasn't clear from the way I talked about them as our partner, we would not be here without Africanunda with this many people in the room. So I do want to thank you personally for that. All right, now I want to get into a little bit of the nitty gritty of how I introduced this panel, which is that any funding, whether it's philanthropic or debt or whatever, it comes with terms or strings, if we want to say informally. Those strings could be the interest rate of the loan. They could be that it has to be given to a certain type of organization. They could be that you have to follow our procurement rules. They could be it has to be paid back within a certain amount of time. It could be you have to hit 1 million beneficiaries, whatever it could be. Usually, if somebody's giving you money, they're giving you money because they have an objective. And that's true of any money you ask for. How do we make sure that the people who are trying to build a DPI, the terms are aligned with the mission that they have, and that we're not adding strings, adding terms that are going to inhibit their ability to accomplish their mission? And so, Robert, again, very quickly to you, and I would like to highlight that Co-Develop, I think, has done this amazingly well. Of all the different donors I've worked with, the alignment of your terms are perfect. Can you talk about how you've done it, and also some of your previous experiences about how to make sure those terms are mission aligned?
Thanks, Steve. I don't know if they're perfect, but we're still learning every day. I think as the name of the organization suggests, we co-develop, meaning that we're working hand in hand together with partners. One philosophy that I've had ever since I've been in philanthropy, and I was previously at Omedia, is really taking into account local expertise and knowledge. I think that's hugely important in terms of the work that we do. Yachu, who's seated to my left, he's an expert in this market. And if we're working together with AFR, then it is in all our best interests to take Yachu's experience and knowledge into consideration, for the best benefit of the project that we're working on. So taking into account partner experiences, partner knowledge, I think is hugely important when working on projects. The other thing that I find works also is that at which point do we shift or move away from being a funder and implementer and just being a funder, right? I want to work with a trusted organization. I do want to fund an organization that has the capabilities of being able to implement on stated objectives. My overarching goal at Co-Develop is to have 50 countries adopt digital public infrastructure at population scale in 5 years. That's my overarching goal. And there are different ways of getting that done. So I will look at really putting a lot of trust and maybe acting really as a thought partner with local experts, local partners, to ensure that the project is successful. Steve, you and I were having a conversation over coffee, and strings is usually a difficult word to think through because it implies control. It implies a number of different connotations that may or may not exist, right? So, but I think putting strength into local partners, and even when investing in digital public goods, I've found that it's extremely important when DPGs are also building the capacity, skills, and knowledge of local system integrators. I've been in situations before where DPGs have great SIs, but the SIs are not local. And so one of the thoughts that I would put across is, why don't you look at also building local capacity? Because after you're gone, who's going to manage that digital public good? Who's going to solve problems if they come up? That knowledge needs to be left in country, and I think it's extremely important if we're going to have a respectful relationship with grantees. Yeah.
Talking about the respectful relationship with the grantors, I'll finish on that. Is there's one thing, and sorry, this is not a Co-Develop love fest, I promise, but there's one thing that when we first started working together, Co-Develop said, well, we want you to give us monthly reports. And my experience with donors in the past was a monthly report is a 20-page document that you give me a format that I have to fill out, and it's a pain. And the fact that you were like, we need this once a month, I was like, no. But then it turns out the answer is no, just whatever you have, just do that, and we'll have an informal conversation about it once a month. And I can say that in those conversations, they're far more helpful to me because the Co-Develop team is giving advice, ideas, and feedback, not just me spending days writing a report that gets submitted into the void that I don't think you actually read. And it's little things like that you guys have done that I think are critical in how it's different from the way other funders have done it. So that was one little thing I wanted to highlight of as a grantee, what we have found to be amazing. So thank you for that. Jean Bosco, same question. How do you make, especially because you work with fintechs? Fintechs are companies who theoretically should be getting also a lot of capital. How do you balance? And they're also not set up to manage the strings of grants. How do you manage that? How do you manage to reduce the burden on the folks that you fund to make sure that they can really hit their impact?
Yes, thank you, Steve. I must echo your point about Co-Develop. I like the co-creation approach that they have, but also it came as a shock as well to me after having worked with so many DPs, where actually the requirements are they're clear, and you focus on the most important aspects, and you are not actually writing 40-page report every quarter and no one is reading it, and you find that in discussions actually no one has read it, yet actually the entire team worked tirelessly on it and ensure that it's delivered on time. It can be frustrating when it's revealed that until actually at some point, I think from the learnings that I picked from Co-Develop, I'm engaging my other DPs to say, can I create live dashboards where actually I give you credentials? You go there, you'll see what is happening. So if you have any additional questions, let's discuss rather than actually me producing that 40-page report that you are not reading yet. Actually, people have invested a lot of time and energy. Now, how do we work with innovators like fintechs, and how do we ensure that they meet our terms? I must say it's any funding has requirements. The way we, as a basket fund, we receive funding from different development partners, there are clear requirements in the grants agreements that we sign. Now, we should actually extend that to the implementing partners below us and ensure that we are representing the funder behind us appropriately. Now, what I've seen is that, there are different categories of implementing partners or grantees. There are grantees such as fintechs. They have brilliant solutions that are groundbreaking, but they don't have the right systems, policies, and procedures even to manage even 20,000 USD that you would give them. So the way we have adjusted, we have said, yes, because we have identified them as the right implementing partners or partners for us, either when we find that they don't have the required procedures and policies, we co-manage the funds, but using our procurement and our policies and systems, but they are part and parcel of the process. So when we find that their processes and policies are, I would say, medium risk, actually we give them money in tranches, but also we help to build their capacities in terms of establishing what they don't have, so that when we come next time, we'll find them more ready to actually absorb the funding and manage. Because in fact, there's one entity that, the leader came to me and said, among all the support you have given me, what I've appreciated most is the fiduciary risk assessment you did, because you showed me gaps that I needed to address and you supported me addressing them beyond the grant on the project. So that's adapting. Yes, you continue working, but you support them and understand them where they are, but grow with them. So I think that flexibility is very important, and we have harnessed that. I think the other thing is, which is critical, especially for those pursuing funding, is to know that, every entity has requirements and you need to understand them, know the incentives, know the requirements, know their interests, and map them. Understand what is negotiable and non-negotiable, because that's how institutions work. And negotiate that. Whatever is negotiable, negotiate it. And agree on something that is feasible from both ends. Because really, any funder, because they are pursuing development impact, they will always find a way, especially when you are the right partner, they'll find a way to work with you. But you need really to share your worries and your concerns so that actually you have a common ground to work with. Thank you.
A lot of things I could bring up on that. I think one of the things about having the transparency that you talk about, of being clear that everyone has requirements. And so when you're clear with your grantees, you say, well, these are our requirements, and being clear up front, saying, yes, everyone has terms, but as long as you can be clear about what your terms are and there's no surprises. And the other one is as you mentioned, you're all funders, but honestly, you're all intermediaries. In the end, there are human beings who made a lot of money, who have contributed, and you are responsible for doling that out. None of you are billionaires who are giving out this money. Some of the terms that are put on you, you're right, you have to pass down, but some of them are negotiable. And I think what you guys can be in a great position to do, and from what I understand you do, is those fintechs can't negotiate with a government donor on those terms, but you can. And I think that from what I've understood, that's That's something AFR has been a great champion of doing. Wale, to the extent you can, same question of you are the assisting to fund and helping with the funding for RNDPS. How would you help to make sure that the implementers of an IIPS have the resources they need, but also abide by the strings that are associated with those resources? Any thoughts on how Africanada can help with that?
Thank you very much, Steve. What I'd like to do is share very quickly, the benefit of our experience in terms of helping payment system promoters and stakeholders, such as the people in this room, how to find that funding, how to make your payment system bankable. And I said bankable, how to approach potential grantors. The good news is that never have we seen, like we have today, the intention by so many grantors and multilateral agencies to put money into developing instant and inclusive payment systems. So that's a big plus. The minus is that there are not always enough resources, and there's competition for resources on the continent. The things I would like to share today are not exclusive. One second, sorry. Are not exclusive and can be best regarded as a sort of guide in terms of preparing for conversations and getting ready to start those difficult funding conversations. I think the primary number one consideration is that the implementation of the payment system must foster and advance financial inclusion. That's basic. If you're not able to do that, then don't even start the conversation about looking for either funding from philanthropy grantors or even from the multilateral agencies. Secondly, recourse will always be had to specific national or regional circumstances. So definitely, people will be looking at the social, political, and economic conditions in the country, looking at exclusion statistics, the state of infrastructure in the country, because all these things have an impact on the funding that will be required to build and deploy a payment system. One thing that is also clear, and I think we saw evidence of this morning, is that you must have very clear and unequivocal sponsorship by government and also by the central bank. If you are planning on building a payment system, you're looking for funding, and you don't have the central bank and the government 100% behind you, it's going to be a challenge. It also means that if you want to look for funding, a lot of the people who provide that funding are also looking to see, is there a strong hub operator? Is there strong private sector endorsement? Are the digital financial institutions in that country or in that region happy with this idea? You must consult all stakeholders widely. I think that one thing we've also seen in the market is that evidence of a national financial inclusion strategy provides a lot of comfort for potential funders. They want to see that this is not a one-trick pony. This is not something that is a fancy and that you're going to walk away from in 6 months. So the availability of a national financial inclusion strategy provides comfort to prospective funders. Sometimes prospective funders want to see that you have undertaken a proof of concept. So that's a deployment on a much smaller scale. Sometimes they want to see it perhaps even go beyond a proof of concept and to a small pilot. That provides a lot of confidence for potential funders also. Funders have different interests. And I think Steve alluded to this in his opening remarks, that nothing comes for nothing. So in our experience, we've seen that some funders have a preference for payment systems that are based on open source and digital public goods systems. So with those sort of funders, if you are not coming from that perspective, then it's not very likely that they're going to support you. Some funders perhaps have a bigger appetite and are happy to consider other types of solutions and still provide funding. Donors also have preferred investment destinations. So this is often a function of socio-political environment on the continent. You will find that some of the so if you're looking at GIZ, you're looking at the French Development Agency, they all have preference countries, they all have specific markets they would like to develop. So Africanenda also has learned how to work with those countries, with those agencies that have particular interest groups and can help put your story together. Prospective payment system promoters must also be keen to understand that there are conditions for philanthropy money. So things like global access requirements. These are when you take that money, you must commit in terms of giving back. You must commit in terms of sharing, because whatever has been developed from philanthropy money. So while you still may reserve some amount of latitude in terms of advancing and developing your commercial interest, you must always recognize that you have an overarching obligation in terms of your global access responsibilities. I think it's important also, we heard about the level 1 principles. The level 1 principles are very important for a lot of prospective funders. And I think it's important also that I mention that Mojaloop is level 1 principles, compliant, but there are also, you can also have level 1 principles in non-Mojaloop deployments. So again, it depends on the funder. We find also that for promoters who are also able to have some skin in the game, provide some amount of counterpart funding, that is also a big plus. And also, more and more, we're seeing that prospective grantors don't want to work alone. They want to work with other grantors, perhaps share the risk, spread the risk, and ultimately enjoy the delivery. So more and more, we're seeing that if a project is going to cost $5 million, you would find maybe 2 grantors, sometimes 3 grantors. If I look at the work that has been done in Rwanda, for instance, Rwanda is a 3 grantor environment. So you've got the Gates Foundation, you've got GIZ, and you've got my dear brother to my right here. I think also prospective promoters must also be aware that more and more people are building in safety guards in terms of funding. So sometimes, you must be ready to work with implementing partners such as Africanenda. You must also perhaps be ready to work with fiscal agents, depending on what the grantor wants. And maybe in conclusion, because I see our time is far gone, I'd just like to say that, for those of you who choose to work with Africanenda in terms of funding and looking for funding, Africanenda does not charge or make a commission or have any commercial interest in your funding. Thank you.
Thank you all. And I think there was a lot to unpack there. So I saw you reading off of things. Please publish what you said, because it would help all of us who are partnering with you to know that was amazing. But it was a lot. So one of the things that you said that I would like to highlight, which kind of comes to strings, but even more fundamental than the strings things I was talking about, is that sometimes the donor wants, or the funder wants, a certain thing, and that's fine. They can have that geopolitical interest. There's no problem with that. But the implementer might not be 100% aligned with that. And I think with the service that Africanenda provides of if the implementer has a round peg and this particular donor is a square hole, you guys go out and find a round hole for them. And I think that's a great service that you provide to implementers, is sometimes it's just a matter of matching the right funding that has the right mission for the right implementer. And that's an incredibly important role to play in the ecosystem. So without any of the countries that are considering deploying Mojaloop or another system for an IIPS, I really hope you reach out to Africananda. And so with that, for the last 2 minutes, I do want to give it the last question, and you can also add whatever you want, is if somebody is interested in looking for help from you, how does somebody approach AFR saying, I'm looking for help, I'm looking for resources? How do they engage with you? And then also whatever other comment you wanted to make.
Thank you. Probably before I respond to that, I wanted just to add, and thank you, Wale, for, the elaborate, process kind of, and wise words on how to actually approach funding. I wanted to add that in most cases, these instant inclusive and instant payment schemes, they are backed by governments. And some of the donors actually don't, or within their policies, they may say, we don't give money to actually a public entity or a government-backed entity. And the way we have gone around that in this country is actually to work, because there's something you want to achieve. It's clear, you have a blueprint, you have a roadmap. As a country, you have decided this is the journey you want to take. And government is putting some money, but as long as you have institutions like Africananda or AFR or FSD, I think we were discussing that over break. I think the most important thing is not money flowing to a certain entity. It's actually money achieving what it should achieve. And we have navigated that, where actually we say, if the donor is comfortable to place their funds with this entity, because they trust probably anything they want to trust, then we say, oh, it's okay, put the money there, and they will be accountable, but as long as they contribute to the overall goal. So it's very important that, that's what I said, to understand the requirements and find ways to go around it, and work with partners like Africananda, us, and others that actually can play that role for you, and even report back to the donor the way they want it, and so on. Even, another thing which is critical is actually procurement processes in this space. Government procurement processes can take months and months, and the donor will be frustrated. If there is a nimble organization that can take that role, still satisfy the requirements of the donor, why not, as long as you're achieving your goal? So it's very critical. Now, how do you approach us? I think, as I said, us, be it fintechs that want to connect to the open API on the eCash platform, be it already others which we are supporting, and we are walking this journey together. But I would say that in other African countries, where around 10, we have FSDs. So if Africananda is not there, there is an FSD. Just talk to them and see how actually you can put together a case that is compelling and can actually convince all these DPs to support you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was amazing. Robert, can you please close us out with the last words?
Thanks, Steve. I just wanted to highlight an event that we recently had about 4 weeks ago, and some of you in this room attended, the Global DPI Summit in Cairo. For any organization or country that's looking at working with co-develop, we've got some very useful case studies on how we work on our website, investments that we've made and how we fund. So I'd strongly encourage anyone in the room to have a look at those case studies, and please feel free to reach out. We're also looking forward to the 2025 DPI Summit. And so please keep a close watch on the announcement of where it will be before Christmas. Thank you.
Where is the DPI Summit going to be next year? Have you announced the location yet?
Not yet. So
Okay.
You've got to watch our website, yeah.
Okay. All right. We're actually just a little bit over, so I'd like to thank my amazing panelists who talked about a touchy subject, which is money. Nobody ever wants to talk about. But you guys did a great job. Thank you for candor and openness. And I would ask all of the country and the potential implementers, please come up and talk to them in the breaks and ask them any questions you might have. And with that, thank you very much. And we'll take our quick picture.